Hello, my name is Reverend Dr. May Elise Cannon. Today is Friday, June 28th, and today is 266 days since the attacks by Hamas on the south of Israel on October 7th. I think I've shared before how I have a partner with us at Churches for Middle East Peace who's on staff who helps me post on social media personally and for CMEP. She often pulls out clips from sermons or messages. She pulled out one recently from the talk that I gave at Christ at the Checkpoint a few weeks ago in Bethlehem. And during the talk, I was completely raw. I cried from the beginning to the end. Honestly, I would much rather have not given the talk. But I'll be honest with you, I would rather be brokenhearted about what's happening in Gaza, and I'd rather my heart be broken to it and allow my heart to be soft than to be hard-hearted in terms of what's happening in the Middle East. And when I look at the death toll in Gaza, the thousands and thousands of people who've been killed, when I look at the realities that are happening throughout the Middle East, when I look at the thousands of children not only who've been killed, but the thousands of children who are experiencing malnutrition and will have permanent deficits, and even the tens of thousands who already are struggling with daily hardships of having difficulty finding water and food. I'd rather be a weeping mess than be hard-hearted. And the reason I'm sharing this is I wanted to just share with you some of the comments of what people have said in response to the clip, where I'm calling the church to return to Jesus, to allow our hearts to be broken about what's happening in Gaza. I wanted to read just a few of the comments. Not that you'd feel sorry for me, but that you might have just an understanding of where some of the American church are at today. So these were comments in response to that message. On social media. Someone said, if you return to Jesus, you would humble yourself and submit to his word that bans women from the pastorate. Another one said, sniveling is hard to sit through. There were quite a few comments about women being a priest. What a joke. Maybe you're trying to call people to something that God has not called them to. Another person said that the message was contrary to the word. Someone said, chill, Karen. Another person said, you're not a pastor. This is not even a church. And another person said, nothing. Clearly, you still operate from subjective emotional appeal. Cringe. And maybe some of it has to do with the fact that I'm a woman. Fine. I mean, that is what it is. But the fact that people are more upset about my delivery than the fact that tens of thousands of people have been killed and that the violence is still continuing, and that is what the church is wrestling with, grieves me greatly. So what's happened in the last 24 to 48 hours? In terms of Israel and Lebanon, Defense Minister Gallant has said that the Security Cabinet meeting, he clarified to the U.S. officials that Israel is not the one who wants war in the north, and that if an agreement is to be reached with Hezbollah, it would include the withdrawal of the group's forces from the border, and that would be acceptable, according to Israeli government perspective. Also, the U.S. is moving military assets closer to Israel and Lebanon. And the U.S. communicated that part of that reason is they want to be present in order to be able to evacuate Americans from the region if that's going to be necessary. In terms of Gaza, the Israeli Defense Forces said that their forces from the 98th Division launched an operation in Shujadia, above and below the ground. And so we have not heard a lot about Israeli forces operating below ground. This was in response to intelligence about the presence of militants and infrastructure in the Gaza City neighborhood in the north. Residents and Hamas media reported that Israeli tanks advanced further west in the Shakush neighborhood of Rafah, that's in the south of Gaza, once again displacing and forcing thousands of people who'd already been displaced there to leave their tent encampments and to head north to the nearby city of Khan Yunis. Mounds of trash are rotting in the heat and are piling up close to where displaced people in Gaza are sheltering. That's according to a report from the United Nations. This is raising fears about the further spread of disease. And the Secretary of State Blinken met with UN Senior Humanitarian and Reconstruction Coordinator from Gaza in DC in order to discuss the need for more humanitarian aid, as well as addressing security challenges that have been hampering the delivery inside Gaza. We've been talking about one of the major issues has been the civil unrest. And so even if aid is allowed into Gaza, once it is there, it's really hard for it to be delivered because there's been so much civil discord. According to the death tolls in Gaza as of today, at least 37,765 Palestinians have been killed, and the number of those wounded is at 86,429 since October 7th. In the first U.S. presidential debate last night for the election the 2024 election, President Biden noted his 3-phase hostage ceasefire deal. He said that it's been endorsed from everyone from the UN Security Council to the G7. He cited the Israelis. He said that Netanyahu has also endorsed this deal. He said the only one who wants the war to continue is Hamas. They are the only ones still holding out. Just to be clear, that's not entirely accurate. Netanyahu has been very clear. He will not accept phase 2 of the deal that demands an ultimate end to the fighting. He has said that he would agree to a temporary ceasefire, but he has every intention of continuing the war on Gaza. Hananiah in Hamas has said that he would only agree to a permanent ceasefire that's guaranteed. And that's the reason Hamas will not sign on to the Biden agreement. Biden added, we're pushing hard to get them, Hamas, to accept. The only thing I've denied Israel was 2,000-pound bombs. They don't work in very well-populated areas. They kill a lot of innocent people. We're providing Israel with all the weapons they need and when they need them. Trump responded to that and said, actually, Israel is the one that wants to keep going, and you should let them go. You should let them finish the job. He, referring to Biden, doesn't want to do it. He's become like a Palestinian, but they don't like him because he's a very bad Palestinian. He's a weak one. He went on to say, in response to the question of whether or not he'd support a Palestinian state, that he'd have to see. The families of American citizens that are still being held hostage in Gaza criticized both Biden and Trump in a statement for not directly mentioning Israel's hostages in Gaza, including 8 U.S. citizens who remain being held captive there, adding that our loved ones released has to remain a top priority. This is a bipartisan humanitarian issue. We are continuing to call for the release of those hostages in addition to the release of Palestinians who are held unjustly in Israeli prisons. At the Security Cabinet meeting, or a Security Cabinet meeting in Israel, Smotrich told the IDF chief, Halevi, you don't want me to say where I was sleeping on October 6th. I'm committed to Israeli security no less than you are. And Halevi called on Smotrich to retract his comment. And Defense Minister Gallant told Netanyahu that he cannot allow the cabinet ministers to regularly attack the IDF and the Shin Bet as it endangers Israel in the war. Finance Minister Smotrich is also set to backtrack on his decision to freeze the transfer of tax revenue that Israel collects on behalf of the Palestinian Authority to Ramallah. You'll recall the Palestinian Authority gives tax revenue that's held by Israel. Smotrich had said that that was going to be withheld and not released to the Palestinian Authority. And it is said that he is going to go back on that decision. We have heard through some inside sources that comes at a very, very high cost to the Palestinian Authority. The IDF said that there was a 19-year-old soldier that was killed in South Gaza yesterday. And in the West Bank, Yeshdin, which is a human rights group, has published security footage of 3 masked men that broke into a yard of a house and damaged property in a Palestinian village. There's still ongoing settler attacks that are happening on a regular basis. The UN Security Council approved a resolution demanding Yemen's Houthi rebels to halt all attacks on ships in the Red Sea and urged the disruption of maritime security in a critical Middle East waterway, that issue be urgently addressed. I wanted to give 2 other updates. There was a question raised yesterday in my regular live briefing that I do on Thursdays about the arrest warrants from the ICC, the International Criminal Court. And I had thought that those arrest warrants had already been issued, but actually just yesterday, news broke that the International Criminal Court pre-trial tribunal postponed its decision-making process about whether or not it would allow the prosecutor, Karim Khan, to issue those arrest warrants against Prime Minister Netanyahu and Defense Minister Gallant for alleged war crimes. The postponement came following a June 10th application by England that filed what's called a friend of the court brief against the ICC's jurisdiction over the issue. So the ruling yesterday granted the UK's request to intervene, and it granted in advance the right of other countries to intervene. Also, I was asked about the anti-Semitism bill that was proposed in US Congress, and just today in the Jewish Insider, the following was published. It said that Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer is facing mounting pressure from Jewish leaders and Democratic colleagues who have privately voiced frustrations with the continued delay in moving to advance a major bill that's aimed at addressing the recent surge in anti-Semitic activities on college campuses. Schumer, who's been outspoken against rising anti-Semitism, had endorsed previous versions of the legislation. It's called the Antisemitism Awareness Act. But after an initial effort to unanimously fast-track the bill, it failed last month in the Senate. Schumer has since delayed it for several weeks. And so the bill has not been put to the floor for a vote, even as it's expected to pass comfortably with bipartisan support and has won backing from a large number of Jewish groups. In a brief interview yesterday, Schumer, who has rarely addressed the matter publicly, stated he is now looking at every single option to try to get strong bipartisan legislation passed, but there has not been a timeline stated for pursuing the approval of the bill. Tonight, my husband's making a watermelon and feta salad, and I visited, the last time I had this combination was when I was actually on the Gaza border a few weeks ago at one of the kibbutzim that was actually attacked on October 7th. And I am carrying that in my heart and mind. So tonight I will be thinking of those on the Gaza envelope, those in Gaza, Palestinians and Israelis, those, for whom their needs, their grief, their traumas have been so long ignored, and for all who've been traumatized and are suffering. Might war between Hezbollah and Israel be avoided? May the bombing and ground invasion of Gaza be brought to an end? And might all who are held captive be set free? And might peace come quickly? Amen.